From Chicago's CAN TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there. Welcome to the show. So the Chicago City Council met yesterday, and it'd be easy to say that they didn't do very much. I mean, as the pension wildfire rages out of control and CPS is in such bad shape that bankruptcy seems to be like a rational solution. The council talked about drones and drag racers and gun-shaped cell phone cases. But you know what? That's a cheap shot. There really isn't much the city council can do right now until the state shows its hands. And that just might not be for months to come. But there are serious conversations going on from what we hear from reports. The mayor and his budget people are meeting with groups of aldermen, and the word is that they're all looking for that silver bullet, that creative way to raise the revenue that's going to be needed to get out of this mess. There are new aldermen with a few new ideas, and there are established aldermen who want to believe that maybe they now have a voice in how Chicago moves forward. So there could be a few interesting weeks of high-stress negotiating before the council actually meets again at the end of September. Yes, that's right, the end of September. And at that time, they'll probably reveal a proposed budget for the city. Maybe. And guess what? Here's one thing we do know about it when they do that. No matter what they decide, it's going to cost you. We know that for sure. Here today to help us understand what is going on, Hunter Klaus makes a victorious return to the table.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Now a producer at Chicago Tonight at WTTW. Where did you go? You disappeared.
Yeah, I was in California for a while. It wasn't nearly as exciting as Chicago, so I got on a train and came
Guy
back.
makes it big in Chicago media, and first thing he's got to do is run off to California. But like the Verizon commercial, they come
I was really
back.
worried about the earthquakes. I had to get out before the big one hit.
You got to get away from being west of I-10 or whatever that is, right? Yeah. Claudia Morell is not making a victorious return because she's been here a bunch of times, but we're glad to have you here. Claudia Morell is with my favorite news source for what's going on at the City Council, Aldertrack. It's a subscription service, and you guys do some really great work. Glad to have you with us today. And it's a good time to do it because the City Council did have this kind of big meeting yesterday, which really did kind of end with this sense that, well, not much happened there. Everything goes into the big vote at the end, and 48-0. And so what would you say was the most important thing that happened yesterday?
Well, in terms of items that were passed, I would definitely say ending garbage collection at large multi-residential buildings. I think it's 5 or more units.
That's law now, right? That passed.
And it was based on a 2014 Inspector General report that found that the Department of Street and Sanitation wasn't keeping this list of grandfathered in buildings up to date. They hadn't updated it since, I think, 2007, and so there were almost 800 buildings that were receiving the free benefit, and it was costing the city $3.3 million. So Alderman Matt O'Shea introduced that ordinance, and there was only one person who voted against it, and that was Leslie Harrison on the south side. Yeah, and she has a lot of those kinds of buildings in her ward. Yeah.
It's a very interesting topic because, again, it's another one of these things that's been debated and argued about for decades. And you have this argument, and I find this incredibly interesting. I get interested in garbage policy, but I find this really interesting because one of the arguments against it, of course, is, okay, imagine that you have this single-family home that's next to this 5-unit building, and all of a sudden they're telling the 5-unit building that the landlord, who is probably an absentee landlord and just comes around to collect the rent anyway, is going to have to start paying for a dumpster and all that. And they're not going to have real good service, because he's going to be a cheapskate. And so what people are going to do is they're going to walk next door and use your garbage cart. And the garbage cart, and pretty soon, before you know it, the alley is going to be filled with all this trash from all these people. I have a different take on this. I think the reason that they're finally getting around to this, which is it's an ugly little piece of detail that they just didn't want to deal with all these years, but I think the reason they're doing it is that they're softening us all up for the big thing, which is going to be the garbage fee for everybody, right? They're going to say, well, now everybody's paying.
Right, I think that was what was interesting when you look at all these little things that they passed, or little and big things that they passed or introduced yesterday at City Council, is that definitely gives a sense that they're trying to think of like ways to raise new revenue or new taxes. Like there was the soda tax, which would be on top of, I think, like the, like, what is it, 3% tax that they already have on bottled canned drinks. And I think it really shows that, you know, they're thinking about what's going to happen in November when the budget comes and how are we going to plug that deficit.
Right.
You know, I believe this Friday is when the city's supposed to unveil its, it's called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. You know, doesn't sound that exciting.
Oh, the capper.
And it shows like how much money the city actually spent over the last year and how much money it brought in, and it kind of gives a sense of like, you know, how bad things are going into the budget season. So that's one of the things I thought was really interesting about the city council, is that you can kind of see that to some extent, you know, they're trying to think creatively outside of the box and to get like new money into the city. But you know, it was also interesting that they didn't directly address the issue before they went on these 2 months. But I mean, that's not typical. I mean, that's not.
I just because I can't let go of this garbage thing, I am a real contrarian on this. I'm in the 1% who thinks it's probably a really good idea, because, you know, I don't live in a fancy part of town. I live up in the part of town where taxes are a little bit lower, and on my single family home, I'm only paying a couple $1,000s a year in taxes, of which only less than $1,000 goes to the city, you know, and I get great garbage collection. I mean, I could no matter what I throw out in the alley, I could throw everything in my house out in the alley, and they'd come by on Friday and pick it up free. And I have lots of friends who live in Evanston, and it ain't like that in Evanston, let me tell you. I mean, you pay for everything, and you know, they're paying, some of my friends are paying like $300 a month for water and garbage and recycling collection, in addition to all of their taxes. So, you know, it might be time for Chicago to sort of get with the program and say, this is a really big, important service and you need to pay for it. However, this is the one thing that I'm really concerned about, though, is that it also paves the way to just then privatize the whole thing. Because then you can wrap a big bow around it and hand it to Waste Management and say, here, take over the whole thing. So that's where I think it might be going.
Could be, who knows? I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned privatization, because there was that ordinance that was introduced on this last city council meeting that tried to make the bar higher to privatize assets. But you know, there's some question about whether or not that bar is actually a high bar, considering that the mayor can still, you know, round up enough votes to get, you know, many pieces of his agenda passed through the city council. But yeah, it's interesting. I think, you know, there are some services that people, you know, might be willing to pay more on just because, you know, it might not be that expensive to pay for it, or it's something that they think would help the city or help CPS.
Well, that's the really big question that's in front of us right now, and I think what we're seeing is Rahm Emanuel using his considerable public relations skills to sort of soften us all up a little bit by dragging this out and you know, throwing all of these ideas out there. It's like there is no one who doesn't believe that their taxes are not going to go up. I mean, everybody knows it's going to happen, and maybe that's what's happening, is sort of like, well, we just have to figure out what's the least painful way of doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the biggest argument for raising taxes is showing people how bad things can get. And you know, I think that's, you know, one of the things that CPS has been doing really well in their argument for more money, is showing how horrible things will get.
And they are.
And I mean, whether or not you agree with them, well, I mean, I know there are some people who think that, you know, this is an engineered problem. The teachers union has said that the CPS is broke on purpose. Right. I mean, regardless of how you feel about those issues, CPS has been, I mean, I think really good in a public relations standpoint of saying, you know, we're going to have to lay off teachers, we're going to have to do all these terrible things. I mean, they're saying that they're going to try and keep the cuts away from the classroom, but when you're staring down at a $1.1 billion deficit,
They're already
it's
in the
kind
classroom.
Yeah.
9
Kinda
o'clock
hard.
start time, you know.
And Jesse Ruiz, when he was acting CEO, he warned aldermen that the only place left to cut is the classroom. And when Fitch downgraded their bond rating, it said that it doesn't expect the school system to have any cash by the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
And especially
And by the way, I like the way you just kind of like floated across that the Fitch just downgraded CPS to junk status just like this week, right?
and it's just 2 months after Moody's had already downgraded them, so
So
more to come. And they warned that they would likely downgrade it even further depending on what happens the next couple months, because they have a loan due in October, I believe, a $200 million loan they took out.
And they have to like pass a budget at some point for the next school year. I mean, I think like legally they have to do it, I think, by the end of August or
right,
something.
yeah.
And you know, during this time they're negotiating a new contract with the teachers union.
Of course, the state of Illinois has a deadline coming up too. They have to pass a budget by July 1st, I think, right?
I think I remember that. Yeah.
So you know, this is the way we're going to do it. We're just going to keep passing these 2-week and 3-week budgets for forever.
Yeah,
right?
or you'll have like the courts say like you have to fund this,
Right.
like with Medicaid.
Yeah.
But
Let the judges run it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But with CPS, it's just like I used to cover public education. I remember every summer, there were always these problems of like paying the pensions, and in retrospect, it was those seemed like easy problems compared to like what's happening now.
Yeah.
I mean, the other side of it is they're trying to negotiate a new contract with the teachers union, and the teachers union appears to want to try and preserve as many jobs possible to protect as many teachers. And that might be a really hard thing to do, but I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So you were at the meeting yesterday. What did you think was the most important thing or something that we should know about?
Well, I thought the most important thing, or one of the most interesting things, was that when an ethics ordinance came up for a vote, it kind of sparked or renewed this debate about the role of the Inspector General and the Office of the Legislative Inspector General. And aldermen have been trying to kind of merge the two offices, because the Legislative Inspector General polices aldermen and their staff, and the Inspector General, Joe Ferguson, basically polices the rest of City Hall. And they have been trying to get rid of the Legislative Inspector General. I mean, his annual appropriation is less than $400,000, and he actually sued some members of the City Council last year because he said that he doesn't get enough money to do his job. And so they were calling for a formal debate on the issue so they could get the ordinance passed, which they had introduced at the first City Council meeting of the term. But other than that, that was really the only real big debate that was on the floor yesterday.
So where is that going to go? Are they going to be successful at that, at getting rid of the LIG, the legislative?
I don't think so, because the ordinance that is sitting in committee is identical to an ordinance that was introduced, I think, 2 years ago, and then it died with the old term. So it all depends on whether or not the committee chairman, which I think it's in the budget committee, if Carrie Austin chooses to bring it.
All right. And it's kind of interesting to me that it kind of ties in with this thing about having their own budget expert, which I guess has finally happened, right? Didn't they hire somebody?
Yeah, Ben Winnick for the new independent budget office, but he really only has about 2 months really with the budget time.
That's true. Yeah. How'd you like that job? Yeah.
Fire up the calculators.
Yeah. But maybe going forward, there is. I mean, dare we be optimistic about this? There's a possibility in future years that the city council will actually have its own voice. We'll have some facts that they can deal with, throw back at the mayor and say, no, we don't like the way you're doing this, do this and this. Maybe that's crazy. Maybe it's just crazy talk, right?
Well, I mean, there's certainly, that's the direction that some of the council members want to go into. And, I think as long as the unions become dominant players in these city council races, I think you could see something like that down the road. I don't know if it'll happen, 4 years from now, but I think the unions have finally figured out that they're more effective on local city council races than in a mayoral race. I mean, in a mayoral race, their only real shot is to try and bring up issues that perhaps are not in the public discussion as much, like with Chuy Garcia, who was able to raise a number of issues. But
yeah, that's interesting because I mean, it sounds crazy, but if you could just swing 10 seats in the city council, you could have a. Well, this is a lesson that's been taught to us all by our friends over at ALEC, the right-wing group that has been taking over all the state legislatures all over the country. You really only have to buy off a few races, and you can have a huge impact in the body politic.
I mean, if you get 26 aldermen, you can do some stuff.
I was really interested in this discussion about this infrastructure trust being shaken up. I mean, I think you guys were around when that whole conversation started, when Emmanuel first got in office, and how he was going to bring in these big-time money raisers, and they were just going to revolutionize how everything was done. So much so that we were sitting around this table all wringing our hands about, it won't have oversight, it won't be, they'll be too independent of the city council. And they raised, enough money to insulate a few buildings, and then they said, this is hard.
Change some light bulbs and called it a day.
That's right, this is tough, we can't do this. What happened?
That's a really good question, because I saw the news about that, and I was wondering, there was such promise.
Right.
Bill Clinton, I think, was at the
Bill
press
Clinton
conference.
Right. It was more than promise, Hunter. It was almost like a threat that it was going to replace legislative government as we know it, right?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I mean, I can't imagine the job is completely easy. I mean, it sounds like they basically have to go around asking for money for things like a high-speed rail to O'Hare.
Right. Or worse yet, you ask money for repairing street lights, something really exciting like that, which of course, famous, favorite theme of mine, government is hard. Government is not easy, especially when you're dealing with things like infrastructure that wears out all the time. You replace a whole bunch of streets and pipes and everything, and then you move on to the next one, and by the time you've done the third one, the first one's already worn out.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to stand on the sideline and carp about it and say government gets everything wrong, and then the private sector guys come in and say, we got this, we'll take care of it. Okay. Well, now they're going to build us a high-speed rail line to O'Hare.
Yeah,
let's
I'll keep
watch
my
how
fingers
that
crossed.
goes.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is I remember seeing this in the news a couple months back, but the CTA actually built I think they spent $200 million building that station downtown, and it's still there. It looks like a half-finished basement.
Yeah.
And I think some college kids, I want to say either Northwestern or University of Chicago, came up with all these ideas about what to do with it. I think they want one of the ideas was to make it a data center, because you could put a lot of servers down there, and it's so cold that it'll keep things from blowing up.
My favorite is that it should be the Richard M. Daley Library.
But underground.
I am so jealous of Greg Hines, because Greg Hines, to my knowledge, is the only reporter who is alive who has ever been down there. He's actually been there. He's seen it. He's stood in that room and lived to tell about it. It's our own little Area 54.
Yeah, it's under block, what's it
called?
Block 37.
Yeah, this was when Mayor Daley believed that he was going to be able to build a high-speed rail and all he needed was a station in the loop, and then it was just going to somehow or other
get to O'Hare.
Just get out there, the deep tunnel or something. Yeah. Another thing I want to throw out is that I wasn't there. I understand you were, but this talking to that Father Flager gave the city council hearing, was it a budget committee? Yeah.
Oh no, it was a finance committee, and it was based off of a resolution that Alderman Will Burns had introduced to block Spike Lee from getting a state tax credit for his filming of Chirac, because he said it portrays the South Side in a negative light.
Right.
And he's like, well, how can we bring tourism and economic opportunity to the South Side if we have this movie that shows all the gun violence down there? And Father Pfleger said to him that he was outraged that he had to come to the city council to discuss the title of a movie and the contents of a movie when the city council should really be spending its time talking about addressing gun violence. And then he said, you know, what economic opportunity on the South Side? I've lived there for decades and there's nothing down there. And you guys need to reorganize your priorities when it comes to this. And Will Burns didn't have a lot of people on his side at that hearing. Even Alderman Walter Burnett sided with Pfleger, and as did Brendan Riley. He mentioned the TV show Boss that got the tax credit, and it portrayed the city council in a negative light. And he said, I don't think the city council should be in the business of deciding movie titles. It kind of goes down a slippery slope.
It's a grand tradition for Chicago politicians to want to censor movies and books and comedy clubs and everything else. It's been that way forever. And
rapper holograms too.
Yeah, and rapper
Chief
holograms,
Keef's,
right, that's right.
Can't get in the city, and neither can his hologram. So.
They can't even send a hologram in anymore.
The Chirac thing is interesting because, you know, one, the tax credit argument is moot because as long as the budget stalemate's going on, like no one's getting tax credits
That's
for
the
films.
thing that's so weird about it. They're having this hearing to talk about this, and Ron is not going to let them have the money anyway, so it's not going to happen.
And also the city council has no jurisdiction over it too, so it's kind of more of a symbolic conversation than anything.
But Chief Keefe actually raises a whole different level of issues of all the stuff that's going on right now with police and the the monitoring of police and all that. Spin this out for us a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, with like the whole Chief Keef thing, it's like, you know, he wanted to have a concert in the city to raise money for his friend who was shot and this baby who was tragically killed during the getaway escape. The alleged shooter drove after shooting Chief Keef's friend and tragically hit a kid. And he went ahead for like a benefit concert, but then the original venue was like, no, sorry, we don't want you here. And then they went to Indiana and we're gonna have like his hologram broadcasted in.
He's doing the hologram because he can't come here, right?
Right, I think it's because of there's a warrant for his arrest tied to child custody.
Yeah, okay.
He's 19 years old, and I believe the statement they sent out was that he's a loving father. There's, it's like the same questions of the Chirac thing. Like, can you really censor an artist in this way? And I think Chief Keef said he's going to run for mayor, so he's got 4 years to prepare for that.
Yeah, and I have to give kudos to our mayor for his response to that and saying, I know a little something about residency, and you're going to have to deal with it if you live in Northbrook or you live in California or whatever it is. But yeah, we could be in very interesting times in a couple of years because it would be very interesting to see how Mayor Keefe would deal with President Trump. I mean, I think it's going to be a very interesting time.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of like really fascinating stuff going on with the police department. IPRA has, there have been a number of articles this summer, looking at IPRA and how they investigate.
The
Independent Police Review Authority.
Okay.
Kind of sounds like a southern fried dish. But there have been a number of articles looking at how they investigate police-involved shootings. The Reader, Steve Bulgara from The Reader did a really fascinating piece that, asked, how is it that IPRA has conducted all these investigations and, very rarely, I think it was like, maybe there might have been like one case out of like hundreds that they found that the officer used force when it wasn't necessary. So virtually all the time they side with the police. And then recently there have been not one but two IPRA investigators, former investigators, who said that their supervisors had asked them to change some of the stuff in their investigations that might have been damning towards police officers.
Is that the one that Chip Mitchell reported
Chip
someone
Mitchell,
was fired, right?
Yeah, Chip Mitchell, BEZ broke it. He talked to one person who, if he isn't fired, I think he's in the process, or maybe he was fired, I can't remember. And then after he did that, there was another former investigator in Oakland who was like, yeah, the same thing happened to me.
Oh, yeah.
And whether or not, it'll be interesting to see if that goes anywhere, or if it's just going to be, he said thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of questions about IPRA. A lot of this, just the statistics that, in a clear majority of their cases, they cite of police officers raises some questions about. But on the other side, that mayor says, or McCarthy says, that it just shows that we're training police officers better.
Well, that brings up the number, right? The BGA did a thing maybe this week, talking about how we have the largest number of people shot or killed. It's killed by police, right?
Shot and killed, yeah.
So, and then the mayor says, well, it depends how you look at the numbers.
Yeah, he says that the numbers are on a decline, I believe, is what the statement was from the police department in the city.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, you look across the country and there are all these, tragic instances where, someone is fatally shot and it sparks like protests, and then people start questioning police tactics and stuff. And in Chicago, that really hasn't happened. Although there've been like some pretty serious cases. Like, there was a trial not too long ago of the police officer who, shot and killed a woman. I think it was on the West Side.
Yeah, outside his house.
Yeah.
It's an interesting issue that we've only got like a minute left, but I think this is a national story that's beginning to play out here too. We're seeing it every single day now, where video is nailing police officers. I mean, this is a we're all media creatures here, and oops, that's a copyrighted term. We are creatures of the media, and it just drives me crazy to see this, that everybody's carrying a video camera in their pocket now, and it's beginning to change the way we react with our police departments. It's amazing.
I agree. Yeah, like I thought the same thing, that you're seeing that these issues are not new.
Right.
Like, they've been going on for a long
It's
long
not
time.
that suddenly the police are doing unjustified shootings. It's that they're
Now there's footage of it.
Right.
But yeah, and the accessibility of smartphones, has just highlighted it. And with social media being more connected than ever,
it's the phones,
easy
and it's
to-
also the connectivity.
Yeah,
it's the
you
fact
can
that it's
spread
the fact
it
that
much faster.
It's very hard to stop a piece of video now, because it'll find its way out, in a million ways. Well, we didn't get a chance to talk about transit-oriented development, which is something I want to talk about. We'll talk about it another time.
That's a good one.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we are out of time. I really want to thank you guys for being here today and helping us get through this weird week where it feels like everything's in neutral, but it really
It's
isn't.
summer,
It's actually really running at 80 miles an hour. We just don't feel it. High-speed rail. Hunter Klaus, thank you very much for coming over here from Channel 11. Say hi to everybody over at Chicago Tonight for us. And Claudia Morell, you do the same thing. Say hi to everybody over there at Aldertrack for us, because we love what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Claudia Morell, Hunter Klaus, and we will see you again next week with another program, because you've been watching Chicago Newsroom. We are community service of CAN TV. You can watch us online anytime you want by going to this address, and you can watch the show. We're always here, as we like to say, take us to the beach. It's nice weather. Just what? You don't want to do that? Okay. Anyway, see you next week. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks for watching us. We'll be back on Chicago Newsroom.